Order, please. Before we start the daily routine, the subject matter for late debate has been chosen, and I will now read it. Therefore, be it resolved that the changes to the EI affecting seasonal workers introduced by the federal Conservative government on January the 16th and the abolishment of the Board of Referees for the EI appeals brought about by the same federal omnibus changes to the EI system be unreservedly condemned by all members of this House. Submitted by the member for Colchester Musquodoboit Valley. Presenting and reading petitions, the honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg to table a petition whose operative clause, we the undersigned residing in Western Nova Scotia, namely the counties of Annapolis, Digby, Yarmouth, Shelburne and Queens, are petitioning the Nova Scotia government for the expansion of midwifery services in the western region of the province. Another note here, which was quite interesting, that May 5th be acknowledged by the government as International Day of the Midwife and declared as a recognized day throughout Nova Scotia. There are 297 signatures, and I have affixed mine as well.
The petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees, tabling reports, regulations and other papers, the Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to table the Workers' Compensation Board of Nova Scotia Annual Report 2012.
The report is tabled. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to talk about an announcement the Premier and I made this morning regarding the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development's new Early Years branch. This announcement shows our government is committed to ensuring Nova Scotia's youngest citizens have the supports they need to reach their highest potential, and we have come up with a plan to do so. I've talked to many parents and grandparents, and they tell me that the health and education of their children and grandchildren needs to be a priority, and the success of our province depends on the foundation our foundation our young people get early in life. Mr. Speaker, I could not agree more. I'm pleased to say that we are improving the future success of our young people through a greater focus on the early years, the basics, and safer and better schools. The Department of Education has expanded its mandate to include child development and is now the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. Mr. Speaker, this is a fundamental philosophical shift in how we do our work. Research shows that the years from birth to age 6 are the most important in a child's development. The province provides more than 200 programs and services to support children in those early years. Unfortunately for the average family, though, finding out how to access these programs and services can be confusing and frustrating. And sometimes opportunities are missed or the services are found too late. Mr. Speaker, the system has to be easy to navigate and responsive to the needs of our families. Over the past year, the province has done a lot to develop a plan that simplifies the support system for parents and puts the focus back on families and children. Hundreds of Nova Scotians provided input and ideas on ways to improve and make life better for our children. The plan is about bringing expertise from across government into one team, a team that will meet the needs of families with young children. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our Early Years Advisory Council co-chairs, Anne McGuire and Mary Lyon, and all the council members for their hard work and recommendations. I would also like to thank all Nova Scotians who took the time to attend focus groups, fill out surveys, or send us their ideas and their suggestions. By working together, our government has come up with a plan, Mr. Speaker. The province has created a single team of professionals and experts in child development to better support our children. That team will comprise the Early Years branch of the new Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. Mr. Speaker, Families also want a place in their own community where they can go and get the support that they need. The province has had great success with Schools Plus, and we are adopting the same approach with the new early years centres. These centres will bring programs and services into one comfortable, accessible spot in the community where families will find it easy to get the support that they need. While more details of these centres will come in the future, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that these will be welcome resources in community. Based on the needs of the community, the early years centres will provide support for young children and their families by offering seamless access to programs like early learning and childcare, early intervention, and education for parents. Helping families identify issues early on is key to a child's development, Mr. Speaker. The province will develop a comprehensive system to check in with parents when their children reach age 18 months and again at 36 months, free of charge. Early identification and supports are vital to giving our children the very best start in life, which is why we are developing a comprehensive, standardized 18-month and 36-month wellness visit, Mr. Speaker. And this will be the complement to the current 18-month developmental screening included in the mental health addiction strategy. Mr. Speaker, this will ensure there is time to address developmental supports for children before they enter our schools and will help kids get off on the right foot when they get there. Our very youngest citizens deserve the best opportunities to be successful now and into the future, Mr. Speaker. And our government is making that happen. Mr. Speaker, we all have a shared goal of ensuring our children have the very best start in life, and your support and the work of the Early Years Branch supports this. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the minister's staff for providing a copy of her statement. I had an opportunity to attend government's announcement earlier today regarding early learning, and the announcement is very short on detail, and the minister's responses and questions to estimates were incomplete. As an educator, I'm well aware of the importance of early assessment, early identification, and early intervention. Nova Scotia currently has an early intervention program designed to reach children with developmental delays as early as possible. There are many sites around the province where parents can access that service if they're prepared to wait. Mr. Speaker, currently there are between 200 and 250 families waiting for that service. Many families have to wait between 1 and 2 years to get supports, if they ever get them. And some children age out of the program waiting for service and enter our public schools at a disadvantage. The Ministers of Education, Community Services and Health have stood idly by for the last 4 years as children with needs go without service. A more immediate solution would have been to adequately fund the current programs and to hire additional staff so that the wait list problem could be addressed. In addition to the early intervention services, we have 23 family resource centres across the province, some of which have multiple sites and a broad range of services for family and young children. Again, these services are under-resourced and understaffed. The Nunn report recommended, quote, breaking down the silos and have cross-departmental cooperation so that these services would be more accessible and designed for multiple needs. Mr. Speaker, this is not a new concept. Let's remind ourselves about this government's lack of its commitment to children. They have slashed funding from public education by $65 million over 2 years. The wait lists in our public schools for speech language and psychologist assessments continue to grow. Wait lists for early intervention continue to grow. As well, this is a government who spent nearly $1 million on ads and promotion while they watched these wait lists grow. And although the government says that kids are a priority, their actions state otherwise. Parents have no confidence that their children are a priority for this government. Today, we heard about another plan, but no action. The press release says that every Nova Scotian, including the very youngest, deserve the best opportunities to be successful. The Liberal caucus agrees with that, and that is why we have repeatedly asked this government to stop slash funding to education, to support the programs to meet individual needs, and to stop balancing the books of our province on the backs of our kids. Folks at the announcement today were told, quote, more detail would be coming as early as next week. Would it not be more prudent, Mr. Speaker, to wait until the detail was available, or was the decision to drag folks out again next week just a pre-election ploy? Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians deserve better.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd first like to thank the Minister for providing us with an advance copy of her statement today. It goes without saying that every member of this House would agree that giving the best possible start to our children is a priority. But today's announcement, though welcome, is lacking in details. Providing parents with the necessary resources to support their child as they grow is important, just as giving our kids every tool they need to succeed is. Unfortunately, we still don't know exactly what those resources will be, where the early centres will be, or what services will be offered to them. Accountability requires development of plans that include goals and objectives, timelines and targets, review and evaluation. Unfortunately, today's announcement does not contain any of those things. To make an announcement of such high importance to families in this province but provide no specifics is premature. Parents all over the province will hear of this announcement and be left with unanswered questions. Childcare providers across the province will hear the announcement and not know where they'll fit within the government's future plans for the early years. Low family income is associated with poorer outcomes for children, and the longer the child lives in poverty, the more pronounced the difficulties will be. Under the NDP, the cost of living has gone way up, causing further hardship, particularly for those low-income families. Unfortunately, today's announcement does not address any of the NDP policies that have pushed families into such difficult situations. The Minister told reporters today she was reviewing the funding model for childcare centres. We have stood in this House and asked both the Minister and her colleague, the Minister of Community Services, the exact question. We have now received a total of 9 different responses. Quite frankly, that's unacceptable. The services provided under the Early Years program will matter to every parent with a young child. It will matter to those who operate existing programs. By making an announcement about this fundamental shift without outlining exactly what the shift puts families and childcare workers even further in the dark. This program is undeveloped, and the NDP have kept families guessing long enough. The government has not been forthcoming with details on the future of childcare in this province, and they were not forthcoming with the details of today's announcement.
Thank you. Government notices of motion. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas March 28, 2013 marked the first time that a newly appointed joint Committee of Community and Government Representatives convened to discuss the transformation of services for persons with disabilities in Nova Scotia.
Wayne.
And whereas the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities recognizes that living independently and being included in the community is a basic right. And whereas the Institute for Research and Development on the Inclusion in Society will assist the government and community in developing a roadmap forward. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize contributions of persons with disabilities as agents of change and as contributors to their communities in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas bullying in all of its forms is a painful and complex problem with no easy answers. And whereas to make real change, a societal response is required to address the root causes of bullying and cyberbullying, such as discrimination, racism, homophobia, and transphobia. And whereas the province's approach through the Speak Up Action Plan empowers young people to make good choices in any situation and understand the impact of their behaviour on others so that they can navigate this ever-changing world. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly recognize International Day of Pink against bullying, discrimination, homophobia and transphobia in schools and communities and support the efforts of Nova Scotians who are working to raise awareness of this important issue. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas more than 4,500 Nova Scotians are living with Parkinson's disease, and the number is expected to increase over the next 10 years as the population ages. And whereas April is Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, which provides Canadians an opportunity to become better informed about this neurological disease and to offer support to those who are affected by it. And whereas for more than 25 years, the Parkinson's Society Maritime Region has had an impact on every community across the Maritimes, been the voice for people living with Parkinson's, and is committed to finding a cure through support services, education, and advocacy. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize the month of April as Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, recognize the contribution of the Parkinson's Society Maritime Region and its volunteers for their dedication to persons living with Parkinson's disease. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Eel Lake Oyster Farm Limited of St. Anne de Russo ended 2012 by capturing the Consumer Choice Product of the Year Award at the Taste of Nova Scotia prestigious awards, and whereas Eel Lake Oyster Farm began 2013 by being named Agriculturist of the Year by the Agriculture Association of Nova Scotia for their outstanding dedication and service to the industry. And whereas Eel Lake Oyster Farm now produces a significant percentage of Nova Scotia's export of cultivated oysters, therefore be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate Noel and Kim Dion of Eel Lake Oyster Farm in Yarmouth County on their most recent awards and achievement and wish them continuing success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. There seems to be a lot of chatter in here this afternoon. I wonder if the honourable members would take their conversations outside the chamber so I can listen to some of the resolutions. The Honourable Minister of Communities, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dance Nova Scotia is dedicated to the promotion and development of dance and strives to increase its availability to Nova Scotians of all ages, backgrounds and abilities, and whereas Dance Nova Scotia, in partnership with the Canadian Dance Assembly, invites all Nova Scotians to participate in the second annual National Dance Week, April 22nd to 29th, 2013, to celebrate the positive impact of dance as expressed through the Canadian Dance Assembly Dance Manifesto. And whereas the manifesto declares that dance in all its diverse expressions is a force for social good and human advancement, that enlivens the body, engages the mind, and inspires the spirit. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly recognizes the contributions of dance to our health, culture, and creative economy, and congratulates Dance Nova Scotia on its exceptional work in promoting dance as an integral component of Nova Scotia communities. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Communities, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's diverse culture and heritage contributes to vibrant communities that make life better for families and create better places to live, work, and raise a family. And whereas the Shambhala community contributes to the diverse fabric and prosperity of our province by sharing its cultural distinctiveness with the community at large. And whereas Their Majesties, the Sakyong and Sakyong Wangmo of Shambhala, recently welcomed the birth of their daughter, Jetson Yudra Lamo. Therefore, be it resolved that this House joins me in congratulating Their Majesties, the Sakyong and Sakyong Wangmo of Shambhala, and the entire Shambhala community on this joyous occasion, and wishes them all continued good fortune, health, and happiness. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I start off by having an introduction first?
Most certainly.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, in the East Gallery, we have with us today three valued members of my staff, and I'd like to introduce them and ask them to stand as I call their names. Brian Ward. Brian is the Director of Highway Engineering Services. Mike Balsam. Mike is the Manager of Traffic Engineering and Road Safety, and Lashana Smith, a Policy Analyst. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that the House give these members their usual welcome. And
we welcome all our guests to the gallery and hope they enjoy this afternoon's proceedings. I will now recognize the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act, respecting innovative transportation.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statute 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act, respecting innovative transportation.
Bill number 37, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act, respecting innovative transportation.
Order the bill be read a second time on a future day. Notices of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Speaker, hereby give notice on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today, people all over the world are wearing pink to unite in celebrating diversity and raising awareness to stop homophobic, transphobic, and all forms of bullying. And whereas the International Day of Pink has grown out of the initiative of two young men from Nova Scotia, David Shepard and Evan Price, who saw a fellow student at Central Kings High School being bullied for wearing pink, and then wore pink themselves to stand in solidarity. And whereas while the actions of David and Evan at the time were simple, the intent and message that by standing united, bullying can be stopped and socially unacceptable is as relevant and powerful today as it was in 2007. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House acknowledge today, April 10th, is International Day of Pink, and be ever mindful that each and every one of us has the responsibility to stand up and speak out on behalf of the diversity of others. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Dalhousie Impact Awards is an event held annually by the Dalhousie Student Union in collaboration with Dalhousie University to recognize outstanding individuals who demonstrate leadership, civic engagement, and exemplary contributions to the university community. And whereas the 2013 Impact Awards were held recently on March the 26th, 2013 at the Dalhousie Student Union and included the presentation of approximately 70 awards in 5 categories. And whereas the recipient of the 2013 Student Activist Award, which recognizes a student who demonstrates passion and commitment to social justice, leads by example, inspires others, and acts with integrity, and who is selected by members of the Dalhousie Student Union Council, is second-year law student Rosalind Chambers, who has deep family ties to the North End of Halifax. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this legislature congratulate all the winners of the 2013 Impact Awards, including student activist Rosalind Chambers, and wish her and all of her fellow recipients continuing success and recognition in university and beyond. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the month of April in Nova Scotia is designated as Insurance Broker Month, a designation that has been acknowledged and celebrated since 2007. And whereas throughout the month of April, a series of events will be held to raise public awareness of the incredible support as well as the personal and professional advice provided by over 1,100 brokers from one end of this province to the other. And whereas honesty, knowledge, integrity, and service are among the core values and beliefs which shape the service provided by insurance brokers to clients and communities across this province on a daily basis. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly acknowledged April as Insurance Broker Month in Nova Scotia and extend our appreciation to all members of IBANs for their professionalism, caring, and support of all clients from one end of this province to the other. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Chronicle Herald hosted the 5th annual Nova Scotia Spelling Bee at the Citadel High School Spats Theatre on Saturday, March the 30th, and whereas 54 students from across Nova Scotia competed for the Provincial Spelling Bee crown, and whereas Erica Walsh, a grade 6 student at Waverley Memorial Elementary School, competed, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating Erica Walsh on her accomplishments and wish her continued success. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Richmond Rise Under-16 girls volleyball team competed at the Cape Breton Attackers Invitational Tournament on February 23rd. Whereas the Richmond Rise team beat the Attackers in the gold medal game. Whereas the team consists of players Keisha McNeil, Megan Price, Kaylee Landry, Hilary Benoit, Grace Starkey, Janelle Martel, Adonica Sampson, Christine Boucher, with head coach Trina Sampson, assistant coach trainer Mike Hawk, and assistant coach JP Boucher. Therefore, be it resolved, members of the House of Assembly join me in congratulating the coaches and players of the Richmond Rise Under-16 girls volleyball team for winning gold at the Cape Breton Attackers Invitational Tournament and wish them continued success. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, hereby give notice on a future day shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 1722, one of the most brazen acts of piracy took place in Shelburne Harbour, where 12 ships were taken in a single day by a single gang of pirates, with many fishermen pressed into piracy on that day. And whereas Shelburne County is steeped in the history of iron men and wooden ships, and whereas the residents of Shelburne County have taken it upon themselves to promote those pirate and seafaring legends in order to provide entertainment and to encourage visitors to the experience all Nova Scotia, Shelburne County has to offer. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly recognizes and supports the efforts of citizens of Shelburne County and their pirate theme activities and their continuing efforts to have Shelburne County become known as Pirate County, Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption following resolution. Whereas Richmond Literacy Network and Department of Labour and Advanced Education partnered to deliver the 5th Age Advantage Plus program in Richmond. And whereas the Age Advantage Plus program is targeted towards individuals between the ages of 55 and 64, with its primary objective to prepare older workers for new and immediate employment in their communities. Whereas on March 28, 2013, a ceremony was held at l'Auberge Acadienne Inn to celebrate Marie Brau, Warren Fougere, Deanie Woods, Sheila Long, Lorraine Boudreau, Sharon McGraw, John Tissell, Rosaline Forgeron, Marlene Burke, Brian Buchanan, Kate Silver, and Arlene Bussey's graduation from the Age Advantage Plus program. Therefore, be it resolved, members of the House of Assembly join me in congratulating each participant of the Age Advantage Plus program for their hard work and dedication and wish them success in obtaining employment. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Living magazine held a Best in Canada contest to find the best shortbread cookies in Canada. And as a result of the contest, 8 bakeries across Canada were tied for the distinction of making the best shortbread in Canada. And whereas one of the winners of the Best Shortbread Cookies in Canada contest was Helen Buchan at the McGregor's Tea Room and Restaurant in Pictou, which is owned and operated by Helen Buchan and her husband Hollis Corbin. And whereas Helen Buchan makes her best shortbread cookies in Canada from an old family recipe, which uses local ingredients, and she sells her shortbread cookies locally at McGregor's Tea Room and Restaurant in Pictou, and has orders from across Canada for her cookies. Therefore, it be resolved, Mr. Speaker, that this House of Assembly congratulates Helen Buchan and Hollis Corbin of McGregor's Tea Room and Restaurant in Pictou for winning the Best Shortbread Cookie in Canada contest, and wishes them continued success with their shortbread cookies and restaurant. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Valley Community Learning Association is hosting its annual fundraising event, the Literacy Mile, on May the 11th, and whereas the Literacy Mile event is not only an opportunity to raise awareness and support the literacy journey of many Annapolis Valley residents, it's also an occasion to recognize and celebrate remarkable personal achievements. And whereas during the past year, 350 learners engaged in a wide range of programs that resulted in GED preparation, reading skills for employment, parents reading to their children for the first time, and just to experience the joy of reading. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate Peter Gillis, his staff, and learners going an extra mile in meeting the challenges of literacy advancement. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the sympathetic urge to assist the poor of the world is a laudable sentiment to instill in young people, and whereas the distress and need of the people of Haiti continues, and whereas the students of Maple Ridge Elementary School in Lance and Riverside Education Centre in Milford recently donated the proceeds of a fundraising campaign called Hearts for Haiti to the Canadian Red Cross. Therefore, be resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates the students of Maple Ridge Elementary and Riverside Education Centre on their altruism and concern for people less fortunate than themselves. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 2013 marks the 10th anniversary for Soltech computers located in Matigan, and whereas throughout the years, Marcel Saunier, along with his staff, have provided outstanding service to their customers, and whereas Soltech computers have made a significant contributions to the economy of Clare, therefore be resolved that the members of the House of Assembly join me in congratulating Marcel Saunier and his staff for the exemplary service they provide to their customers and wish them continued success in future endeavors. So, Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Guysborough, Sheet Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in December 2012, the Guysborough County RCMP District spearheaded a One Warm Coat campaign in the Guysborough County area. And whereas the One Warm Coat campaign collects coats from those who are unable to donate and gives them, free of charge, to those in need. And whereas the organization was able to collect 95 coats and distribute them to Operation Christmas Spirit, Kids First, and the Naomi Society, all of which service the Guysborough County area. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Sergeant Terry Miller and the staff of the Guysborough County RCMP District for their generosity, kindness, and dedication to their community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Deborah Gannon was born and educated in Inglewood and Bridgetown, Nova Scotia, and at the age of 22, she moved to Halifax, where she met and married Lou Gannon. Whereas Deborah joined the New Beginnings Ministry and became the chair of the Fellowship Committee, which entailed catering to such events as a pot of blessing, church anniversary dinners, church picnics, and other special events catering to over 500 guests, as well as she volunteers at African Nova Scotian Music Association Awards and devotes time helping with scheduling and administrative duties. Whereas Deborah has also the first African Nova Scotian to be runner-up in the Queen Annapolis in the 1969 Apple Blossom Festival. She was the first African Nova Scotian female to be appointed to administrative assistant to a senior deputy minister for Nova Scotia, and a first African Nova Scotian female to be appointed to administrative assistant to the Premier of Nova Scotia. Therefore, be resolved that members of this House join me in recognizing Deborah Gannon for her many contributions to her church and to her community, and wish her every success in her future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Lunenburg West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm reading this resolution on behalf of the member for Queens. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas competitive figure skating is an excellent winter sport combining physical activity with creativity. And whereas the Queens County Blades competed in the 2013 Valley Open in Berwick on February 16th and 17th, and whereas Queens County Blades members Bailey Seelig, Carly Huskins, Victoria Hopper, Lauren Amiro, and Emily Dixon successfully competed with medal-winning performances, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly recognizes and congratulates Bailey Seelig, Carly Huskins, Victoria Hopper, Lauren Amiro, and Emily Dixon for their success at the 2013 Valley Open Figure Skating Competition. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 34-year-old Charlie Acourt from McCollum Settlement, Colchester North, previously was with a total of 7 East Coast Music Award nominations and a 2-time winner, was nominated for 2 more awards for 2013. And whereas Acourt was nominated and won the awards for Blues Recording of the Year and R&B Soul Recording of the Year for his latest album, Triumph and Disaster. And whereas this well-known, talented, and socially conscious musician has released a new song with video entitled Not a Fan of Me, which touches on every disturbing topic of bullying and the effects it can have. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Charlie Acourt for winning 2 prestigious awards at the 2013 East Coast Music Awards and express our respect and appreciation for using his fame and talent to bring the topic of bullying to the forefront of our society. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ducks Unlimited Canada is celebrating its 75th anniversary during 2013, and whereas Ducks Unlimited has been a leader in educating national, provincial, and local governments, as well as the public about the importance of wetlands protection, its impact on wildlife management, and the preservation of clean drinking water. And whereas Ducks Unlimited projects such as Miners Marsh and Kentville, and about 40 other projects throughout the Annapolis Valley, not only protect and conserve nature, but also enrich our communities and enhance our quality of life by creating beautiful, tranquil places for us to observe and enjoy nature. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulates Ducks Unlimited Canada, its members throughout Nova Scotia, and the Annapolis Valley chapter in particular, as we all celebrate 75 years of dedicated service to the protection of our natural environment. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas James Boxall, Dalhousie University adjunct professor and lecturer and director of the university's Geographical Information Science Centre, has supported and enhanced geographic and spatial education at all levels, from grade primary through post-secondary school, and was the original proponent of the development of the Canadian Council for Geographic Education. And whereas James Boxall has worked internationally and locally on spatial information projects, including the HRM Sea Level Rise Report, the Have River Protection Project, has been president of 3 national and regional associations related to geography, has served on academic and government boards including the Geomatics Association of Nova Scotia, the Coastal and Ocean Information Network, and the GeoConnections Federal Program, and is a fellow of the Royal Geographic Society with the Institute of British Geographers and a member of the College of Fellows of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. And whereas James has won the Royal Canadian Geographic Society 2012 Literacy Award, a prize which includes $5,000, half of which will be donated to a charity of Mr. Boxall's choice, a new foundation to train teachers of grades primary to 12 in the use of geographic information sciences. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate James Boxall on his award and for 25 years of geographical research and education in the local, national, and international community. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Lunenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the South Shore Players was founded by Roy Porchmuth in 1993 to provide an outlet for amateur artists to engage in theatre productions, bringing the joy of live productions and quality theatre entertainment to generations of people in Nova Scotia, producing an average of 2 performances a year. And whereas the South Shore Players is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, thanks to the commitment and dedication of volunteers and amateur actors and stagehands. And whereas the South Shore Players is celebrating its 20th year with the production of Inherit the Wind, written by Jerome Lawrence and Robin Irwin Lee of 1955, with performances at the Pearl Theatre in Lunenburg 19th of April and the 28th of April. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates the South Shore Players on its 20th anniversary and wishes them success with their latest production, Inherit the Wind. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
On an introduction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to draw the member's attention to the gallery opposite, where we have been joined by the Member of Parliament for Halifax West, a member who is known to many of the members of this House, some of us more intimately than others.
Do tell.
And the member's assistant. Oh no.
One story.
And we've also been joined by the member's assistant, Afton Doubleday, so I would ask the members to give them the warm welcome of the House.
We welcome all our guests to the gallery this afternoon and hope they enjoy this afternoon's proceedings. I will now recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove on a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cresco Home Builders of Bedford have for 20 years demonstrated commitment to craftsmanship, innovation, and customer service. And whereas Cresco Home Builders claimed 5 awards at the Nova Scotia Home Builders Association Peter Kohler Peak Awards held in November 2012, including Marketing Excellence, Most R2000 Homes for 2012, Tech Ready Ambassador, and Most Tech Ready Homes for 2012, as well as the Judge's Choice Award for the Most Outstanding New Home over 3,000 square feet. And whereas Cresco Home Builders, helmed by Principals Talib Abadali and Hossein Masavi, continues to transform Nova Scotia neighbourhoods into active lifestyle communities incorporating accessibility, schools, sporting activities, leisure pursuits, and shopping. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Cresco Home Builders, their owners and staff on their record of innovative design and construction, and on their awards. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the system of appeals for employment insurance has for many years been comprised of boards of referees, tripartite bodies including local representatives from the business community and the labour movement, ensuring that appeals of decisions affecting EI claims have been heard by independent referees knowledgeable concerning local conditions. And whereas the constituency offices of many MLAs have commonly provided advocacy, support, and representation services to constituents before boards of referees, very often resulting in much-needed reinstatements of EI benefits and much-merited reversals of disentitlements, disqualifications, penalty assessments, and the like. And whereas the federal government has abolished the system of EI appeals based on a national network of boards of referees and replaced it with a centralized appeals system lacking entirely in local representation, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly unreservedly condemns the eradication of the Board of Referees appeal system by the Government of Canada and hereby registers its profound disagreement with the removal of local labour and business leaders from the appeal process available to EI claimants in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Digby-Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lions Club in Weymouth have identified the need for a playground suitable for children ages 2 to 5. And whereas the Lions Club has partnered with the Weymouth Amateur Athletic Association to provide this playground to the community. And whereas the playground equipment is scheduled to be installed this month at the ever-popular cricket field in Weymouth. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the House Assembly commend the Weymouth Lions Club, the Weymouth Amateur Athletic Association for recognizing the need for a playground in the village and for putting this plan into motion. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the coldest night of the year fundraising walk in support of the Christian Ministries Open Arms Resource Centre and In from the Cold shelters in Kentville and Berwick was held on February 23, 2013. And whereas the one-night event involved 41 teams, 281 walkers, and 2,376 donors, and raised an incredible $49,082. And whereas the coldest night of the year walk was an unqualified success, rating 7th best nationally in funds raised, 3rd in the number of walkers, and finished an amazing 2nd in terms of donors in this Canada-wide event. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulates all of those who contributed in any way to the success of the coldest night of the year walk 2013. Thanks to the organizers for demonstrating the wonderful things that can be accomplished when people pull together in a common effort, and wishes Open Arms and In from the Cold every success in its future service to the community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 17th annual Jason Simmons Memorial Hockey Tournament took place on Easter weekend at the Bayplex, with 32 teams taking part in our community's exciting and intense adult hockey showcase. And whereas the annual tournament, known affectionately as in the Bay as the Simmons Weekend, is in memory of Bay boy Jason Simmons, a talented athlete, a strong, proud individual, and a community volunteer who died tragically in a car accident in 1997 at the tender age of 24. And whereas, in addition to competitive hockey, reuniting of friends and family, and an electric atmosphere at our rink, the 2013 Simmons will provide $7,000 in much-needed scholarship funds for local graduates this year. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House join me in congratulating Sonny McDougall, Brian O'Neill, Cecil McQueen, Laird Wilton, and the Huff and Puff hockey team for their rock-solid organization of the tournament and commitment to the memory of Jason. And we thank Jason's parents, Jimmy and Tina, for providing the Bay with an opportunity to celebrate the life and contributions of their late, great son. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Order of Canada was originally established in 1967 by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and is designed to recognize a lifetime of outstanding achievement, dedication to community, and service to our nation. Whereas on December 30th, 2012, His Excellency David Johnston, Governor-General of Canada, appointed 91 citizens to the Order of Canada, one of which was Dennis Colville of Hackett's Cove, Nova Scotia. Whereas in 1969, Mr. Colville founded Nautel in Hackett's Cove, and over the next 4 decades, it has become a world-renowned, award-winning transmitter manufacturing company. Dennis has also endowed scholarships at 3 maritime universities and made a substantial contribution for a new cancer unit at the IWK Hospital. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Mr. Dennis Colville on being appointed to the Order of Canada and thank him for his dedication to the business world, higher education, and to the health community, and wish him many more years of good health and dedicated service in making life better for his fellow Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Carnivale Volleyball Tournament was held in Yarmouth over the weekend of April 6th to 7th, and whereas the Southwest Fusion Under-14 Muse team consisting of Madison Burbidge, Kaylee Amiro, Sophie Surratt, Caitlin Mooney, Bailey Gushu, Maggie O'Brien, Riley Mosley, Renee Cleveland, Sydney Dion, Christine Babin, and Julie Phillips, under the guidance of Coach Ricky Muse and assistant coach Jacinda Amiro, was one of the 9 teams in the Under-14 division competing in the tournament. And whereas the Southwest Fusion Under-14 Muse team won gold at the Carnivale tournament, and the team has won gold at all 3 tournaments in which it has competed this year. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the Southwest Fusion Under-14 Muse team for its gold medal win at the Carnivale Volleyball Tournament and wish them much continued success. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas author Diane Marshall is well known to Nova Scotians for her lively and surprising true stories told on CBC Information Morning, and whereas Diane has published her latest book, True Stories from Nova Scotia's Past, in which she shares stories and tales that provide insight into the way life was in early Nova Scotia. And whereas True Stories from Nova Scotia's Past will delight readers with more than 24 stories, ranging from plots to assassinate the future King George V to rum runners and ghost tales. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this Assembly congratulate Diane Marshall on the publication of her new book, which brings to life our rich history in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a new commemorative medal was created to mark the 2012 celebration of the 60th anniversary of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II accessing to the throne as Queen of Canada, and whereas medals are being awarded to Canadians who have made significant contributions to their community and our country, and whereas Daniel Godet of Grosscock was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for his contributions to his community, therefore it be resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Daniel Godet on being awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for outstanding contribution to his community. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Pamela Williams received her bachelor's degree from St. Mary's University and her law degree from Dalhousie University in 1984 and was called to the bar in 1985. Where she spent the next 18 years as a lawyer with the Nova Scotia Legal Aid until she was appointed as a provincial court judge in 2003 and later became an associate chief judge of the provincial court in 2011. Whereas in February 2013, she became the first woman in Nova Scotia to be appointed as Chief Justice of the provincial and family courts. Therefore, be resolved that members of this House join me in congratulating Pamela Williams for her many accomplishments and her excellent contribution to the justice system in Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's fire departments are made up of individuals who are dedicated to serving others, and whereas these firefighters and first responders not only contribute hard work, skills, and time, they often risk their lives and must deal with incidents of great emotional stress. And whereas firefighters seldom receive the accolades which they deserve, most fire brigades hold a banquet and awards ceremony to thank their members and to present special honours. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of the House of Assembly congratulate Brian Reid, a member of the Tatamagouche Fire Brigade, Colchester North, for receiving his 35-year service pin. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today is the 6th annual International Day of Pink, and whereas the Day of Pink was inspired by David Shepard and Travis Price as they endeavoured to raise awareness about bullying and show the support of those who have been bullied. And whereas this courageous act has become an international symbol of anti-bullying with more than 8 million people taking part in activities to combat bullying. Therefore, be it resolved, those members of this House of Assembly recognize today as International Day of Pink, and let today serve as a reminder that we must take meaningful steps to stop bullying in its tracks. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this past December, the Digby Annapolis Christmas Daddies celebrated over 40 years of raising funds for families in need. And whereas Lee Everett and other founding members started the local Christmas Daddies, hoping to do something good for the local community. And whereas before the association was ever a year old, the first show was put on, and since then they have raised well over $1 million for the people in need in that community. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate the Digby Annapolis Christmas Daddies on their dedication throughout the years and wish them more years of success ahead. I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the first weekend of March, the Star Skate Provincial Championships were held in Port Hawkesbury, and whereas skaters from the Yarmouth Skating Club were awarded provincial titles, Shaylee Doucette, provincial champion in the primary ladies A event, Kylie Landry, provincial champion in senior bronze ladies spins, and Chantel Surratt, provincial champion in the senior bronze ladies event. And whereas Kylie Landry and Chantel Surratt have qualified for Atlantics in the senior bronze ladies event and will be part of Team Nova Scotia at the Atlantics competition in Yarmouth Skating Club. Member Sydney Newell is the first alternate in the junior bronze ladies event for the Atlantics. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate these members of the Yarmouth Skating Club on their impressive provincial titles and wish them all the best future competition. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to read this resolution on behalf of the member for Dartmouth East. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Metro Karate Training Centre on Main Street has been building strong citizens for 10 years, and whereas Sensei Ron Fagan was the first Atlantic Canadian to compete at the Pan American Karate Championships and the first to work his way to National A official ranking with the Referee Council of Canada, and whereas Sensei Fagan has since given back a tremendous amount to the Dartmouth community through mentoring, holding anti-bullying seminars, and much more. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate Sensei Ron Fagan of the Metro Karate Training Centre on his 40th anniversary of continuous karate and self-defense training, which happened on February 28th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas every year the Historica Dominion Institute challenges students in grades 7 to 12 across Canada to participate in a mock citizenship exam to put their knowledge of Canadian history, culture and geography to the test. And whereas teacher Kelly Murray from Park West School in Clayton Park took up the challenge with her grade 7 social studies students and won the classroom grand prize, besting 1,000 other classes to win this honour. And whereas the Historica Dominion Institute held a special Canadian Citizenship Celebration Assembly at Park West School on February 19, 2013, to honour Kelly Murray and her winning grade 7 class on their great achievement. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this legislature congratulate Kelly Murray and her students for receiving this award and making her school and the Clayton Park West community very proud. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
A request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Dukes of Canada celebrated a half-century of singing and bringing joy to audiences in our region while demonstrating excellence by winning the Atlantic Canada Barbershop Chorus Championship 11 times, and whereas they have become known for their entertainment, inspiration, and through their love of music, they live their mission statement, enrich lives through singing. And whereas men from across the valley comprise the Dukes, they have had the outstanding musical directorship of Perry Jackson, to whom we all owe a debt of gratitude for his 22 years at the helm, contributing to a legacy of top-quality barbershop music in the Annapolis Valley. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the Dukes of Kent on their 50th anniversary and wish them every success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to read this on behalf of the member for Dartmouth East. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas annually the Dartmouth General Hospital Auxiliary provides between 17 and 20,000 volunteer hours of service. And whereas the Dartmouth General Auxiliary also organizes fundraising efforts, including this winter's Holly Tree Bazaar, with tables filled with baked goods, giftware, and knitted items, and whereas through their exceptional efforts like the Holly Tree Bazaar, since 1977, the Dartmouth General Hospital Auxiliary has contributed more than $1.2 million towards hospital expansion and improvement. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the volunteers of the Dartmouth General Hospital Auxiliary, especially President Sandy Lambie and Chairperson Bernice Turner on this year's Holly Tree Bazaar, and wish them every success on next year's event. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby gives notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Amateur Bodybuilding Championships were hosted in Halifax on Saturday, April 6, 2013. And whereas a team training out of Perry's Gym and Fitness Centre in Glace Bay represented our region proudly with commendable showings in their respective divisions. And whereas bodybuilders Brandon O'Donnell, Mitch Dow, Mark Hennessy, Kevin Bootlier, Brandon Graham, Marianne Moore, Krista McKinnon, and Ashley McNeil utilized their work ethic, discipline, courage, and skill to participate in this intense competition. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House join me in congratulating our local athletes and Perry's Gym for their performance, and we wish them the very best in health and fortunes in the coming year and beyond. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. Orders of the day, oral questions put by members to Minister. The time is now 3:14. I think we will end at 4:44. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sexual assault service providers and advocates across this province have called upon this government to implement a sexual assault strategy to address the issue of sexualized violence. The Minister for the Status of Women assured us in 2011 that the government was aggressively working on a strategy. Yesterday, when questioning the House on this sexual assault, the Minister of Justice insulted every Nova Scotian, Mr. Speaker, with his response to the question. So my question to the Premier is, where is the sexual assault strategy?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the government is working with those who are advocates in this area and with organizations right around the province, and in fact are implementing a program which is designed to meet the needs of Nova Scotians with respect to this very important issue. The Leader of the Opposition would know that there are already in place in some parts of the province specialized medical personnel who are designed to deal particularly with those who are victims of sexual assault. He would probably already know that in the cases of those that are reported and go on to court, there are in fact services in place which are designed to support those victims and to provide them with the services that they need in order to be able to deal with these very important issues.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Speaker, we know that Nova Scotia has the highest rate of sexual assaults in Canada, Mr. Speaker, 40 assaults for every 1,000 people. So given the staggering rate of sexual assaults, Mr. Speaker, in Nova Scotia, and considering they were aggressively working on it in 2011, my question is, why is there no urgency from this government to act, to implement a strategy, to resource outreach initiatives, support victims, and bring aggressors to justice?
Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the fact is that we do all of those things already. We are, in fact, very aggressively dealing with these issues, trying to provide across the spectrum support. So it is of course not enough just to engage in the post-event remediation or remedial issues. It is also important that we are addressing what are the causes associated with it, and that is in fact what the government is seeking to do. It is a societal problem which we certainly acknowledge, and I know that that even on the reporting side, I think the reports are pretty clear that even on the ones that come to our attention, there are literally many-fold more that don't get reported, and therefore we are unable to provide the kind of help that we would wish to be able to provide.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's been nearly 4 years victims, support workers, and all Nova Scotians want action. So my question to the Premier, when will Nova Scotians see a complete sexual assault strategy for Nova Scotia?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as with any strategy or with any action plan, often we do not wait until the strategy is complete or the action plan is complete. We try to put these things in place in advance where they make sense. We have done some of that already with respect to specialized medical personnel. In fact, right across the province, those who are healthcare providers are already received training to deal with people who are victims of sexual assault, and we're going to continue to do that and not wait until there's an overall strategic framework to do that. But I would say that work is continuing. The Leader of the Opposition would know that this is a well-organized community. They, in fact, have been engaged with the government for some time on it. They have had support to, in fact, do some of the work that they are doing from the government in relation to this issue. Thank you, and thank you for the question.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today's early childhood development announcement leaves far more questions than it answers. Everyone, of course, wants the best for our children, particularly in the early years, but a true comprehensive program is both real and meaningful and accountable for results. The handbook, known and called Investing in Early Childhood Development, says, and I quote, "Accountability requires development of plans that include goals and objectives, timelines and targets, review and evaluation." I'll table that for the benefit of the Premier. My question, if the Premier is so serious about early childhood development, why are there no goals, objectives, timelines, targets, reviews or evaluation included in today's announcement?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is that we're working with the McCain Foundation in relation to these early years centres. They are designed on some of the best modeling anywhere, and the reason for this is that it requires actual consultation with communities to decide which services should be in each one of the early years centres. In other words, these early years centres will be tailored to the needs that the community analysis determines, and it also means that they will be different. May be different in one community than in another, because as you know, Mr. Speaker, the needs differ in different parts of the province. In fact, they can differ in different parts of city, the size of Halifax. So, all of the measures that the Leader of the Conservative Party is talking about, of course, will be part ultimately of that of our approach to the early years centres. Right now, we are working with one of the foremost expert organizations in the development of those centres.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on his first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, most people would come up with a plan and do all those things and then announce it, not announce it first and spend all of their time on the glossy cover page and a fancy new slogan and then go out and consult later. Mr. Speaker, that's how you're supposed to plan. A comprehensive early childhood development includes dealing with child poverty. Mr. Speaker, it includes dealing with nutrition and brain stimulation, among other important factors. But under the NDP, the cost of living has gone up, causing further hardship to too many of our most low-income families. Mr. Speaker, since we're talking about early childhood development, does the Premier realize that his own policies, raising taxes and power rates and making life tougher for low-income families, will also have to be reviewed if we're ever going to have a true comprehensive plan for early childhood development?
Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm really I'm baffled by the commentary just provided by the leader of the Conservative Party. He seems to have missed the fact that over the last 4 years there has been more done to reorient income into the hands of low-income Nova Scotians than at any time in our past. Not only did we take the HST off of home electricity, but we also took it off of children's clothing. We also took it off of other necessities in the home. But over and above that, Mr. Speaker, we also took large pieces of the income of coming into the government from HST and transferred it to low-income Nova Scotians through the affordability tax credit, through the disability tax credit. In fact, low-income Nova Scotians are now paying much less in the way of tax than they did when the Conservatives were in power.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the whole problem is that this is a government that gives a little bit with one hand and takes a whole lot more with the other. That's why it's so tough on lower-income Nova Scotians today. But since we're talking about one hand and the other, it's also a government where the left hand and the right hand don't know what each other are doing. Today's announcement, Mr. Speaker, talks about 3 early years centres to be set up somewhere in the province, but at the same time, 30 of our smaller community schools continue to be under review with no plan in sight for how that's going to change. So I will ask the Premier, what does today's announcement say to those 30 rural communities whose schools continue to be under review?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, well, I suppose the answer to that question could go just about anyways, but I start with this. First of all, there's more money in the pockets of the low-income Nova Scotians as a result of the initiatives undertaken by this government. That's the first thing. The second thing is that to date there are 98 schools plus schools in this province where the services of provincial governments or the services of community organizations have been moved into predominantly rural schools in order to be able to make them sustainable in their communities. We want sustainable community schools. These kinds of early years center will further enhance that initiative to make sure not only are the schools sustainable, but the people in those communities and their kids are getting the services that they require, and more so, Mr. Speaker, getting the services they deserve.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, when asked about the status of a province-wide strategy to address rape and sexualized violence, the Minister of Justice was non-committal, refused to answer my question, and then accused the opposition of not having confidence in the police. Mr. Speaker, a committee has been struck with a variety of stakeholders, including government, and has met on this strategy. So my question to the Minister, where's the work of this committee?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you for the question. The issue of, I'm not really clear of what the member is trying to get at, other than the fact that as the Premier had answered in an earlier question, that there's a number of strategies gone forward, a number of committees are met, and work is being done across, and I'll give them one example, is for example, when we deal with the domestic violence court, and all the componentry and how we're measuring that and trying to get the feedback and the information from there and how to expand that program where the benefits are across the province and to address what we see as a very serious problem and concern in the province.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove on her first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time I've raised this issue. I raised it with the government 16 months ago. The Minister for the Status of Women said in this House on December 6, 2011, and I'll table that response, on December 6, 2011, we are taking aggressive action. One would think that 16 months of aggressive action would at least result in a plan or a strategy to address this issue. So my question is to the Minister of Justice. What kind of aggressive action is the department taking? Why have we seen nothing addressing rape and sexualized violence?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you. Thank the member in that question. I think that would be best answered by the Minister of Health, as that falls in his area of responsibility.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. We've taken sexual assault very seriously in the government. We recognize that it crosses many departments. So as the Minister of Health and Wellness, the department has taken the lead with my Deputy Minister to work with Deputy Ministers from Justice, from the Status of Women, Deputy Minister from Community Services, to work with stakeholders. Like Avalon Sexual Assault Centre, Mr. Speaker, we've provided a number of grants now that they support Nova Scotians through anybody who comes to their programs or through a 1-800 telephone line, Mr. Speaker. We've supported programs like the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner in 2 parts of the province. We know we need to improve services for those individuals who find themselves a victim of sexual assault. So we're working with those partners to move forward on a number of initiatives that we already have implemented, and we're going to continue to move forward to ensure that Nova Scotians have access to the support they need, especially those individuals who might find themselves a victim of sexual violence.
The Honourable Member for Bedford First Cove on her final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I find it interesting that the Minister of Justice cannot answer this question because the Minister's website shows a picture of the Minister of Justice with representatives from women's centres who were there to talk about sexual assault services on December 7th of last year. This NDP government is 3.5 years into a majority mandate. So women and girls of Nova Scotia, here's your NDP photo op. When can Nova Scotians expect this government to put the safety of women and girls before photo ops and announce some real action to combat sexual assault?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much. I just want to reassure the member across that as a minister and as a government, we take any form of violence seriously, and that we're committed to that. And that's why we have the domestic violence plan, as you heard my colleague mention earlier, what is happening in the health area. And yes, it's a collaboration. We are working across departmental lines. We're moving funds to address the issue within departmental departments to make sure that we have a collaborative approach and working together to address these issues. And we have a very strong budget for victim services overall. There's over $3 million that go in there. We have the restorative programs that are happening around. We increased benefits to counseling. So we're committed on a number of fronts, and it's a matter of coming together and working in that collaboration to put forth the program. And the collaboration is not only within the government departments, but across all stakeholders within the community. So that's very critical that we have that open dialogue and that we work in those partnerships.
The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we can all recall the advice that the Minister of Education received from Dr. Wayne McKay and the warning to the Minister that steps needed to be taken immediately to try to begin to address the problem of cyberbullying. That was in February of 2012. In the Minister's own task force report, there were 3 recommendations that spoke to Internet service providers and the criminal code. The Minister's own response to that report through Bill 30 was silent on both of those issues. My question to the Minister is this: why would the Minister ignore critical, important recommendations that should have been part of her immediate response?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we have moved forward with the recommendations from the report, and we have implemented an action plan with 40 actions in it that many have started, many are in the process of starting over the 3-year period. We have more supports in our schools. 40 actions are underway in the province of Nova Scotia to combat bullying and cyberbullying. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that we have had a very serious situation in Nova Scotia, and I would like to say that our action plan is in place. But if there's other areas that we can to affect positive change, effective research-based positive change, this government is going to move forward to do them.
The honourable member for Colchester North on her first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The recommendations that I spoke about that were in the task force report speaking to Internet service and criminal code would have gone a long way to help this province. So, Mr. Speaker, this minister has had ample opportunity, 1 full year, to respond to those recommendations and to those in particular. One recommendation which was supported by the Liberal amendments to their Bill 30, and that, of course, was defeated by the NDP, and again, the amendments to Bill 102, again defeated by the NDP, and included in the Bill 106, the Liberal bill, asked, and I quote, "The Governor-General shall direct the Minister of Education, the Minister of Justice, and any other members to enter into negotiations with the Government of Canada with the purpose of making changes to the criminal code with regard to addressing inappropriate behaviour and bullying by the electronic means, including internet and cell telephone service." And I will table that. Over 1 year has passed, and only today has the Premier finally acknowledged that maybe there's a need to work with the federal government on the criminal code. This is 1 year too late. So my question to the minister, will the minister acknowledge today that her inaction has done nothing to help families bring bullies to justice?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Since that was his comment was directed towards the Premier, I would like to ask if it would be okay if the Premier could speak to that. Thank you.
Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just point out that none of those bills were defeated because they did not, in fact, come forward to a vote. The reality is that there is a constant ongoing exchange between the departments here and the federal government about the kinds of changes that we see as necessary, whether it's with the criminal code or with other pieces of legislation, and certainly the Minister of Justice would have those kinds of conversations with his federal counterpart. I would just point out, Mr. Speaker, that as it is now, Nova Scotia is a leader in this country in its approach to cyberbullying and in bullying, has one of the best regimes anywhere in the country. We used a process and essentially a commission to look at that issue and thoroughly examine it. And we took the benefit of that advice and we brought forward legislation and made policy decisions in that regard. So, Mr. Speaker, people in Nova Scotia should be proud of the record of the government of Nova Scotia with respect to this. We acknowledge, and I hope everyone does, that things are always going to change. More information will come forward. We will see events happen that challenge our ability to be able to deal with them. But we do not shy away from them. We accept that and we work toward better and more complete answers.
The honourable member for Colchester, the honourable leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the more important recommendations of the Cyberbullying Task Force, the Dr. Wayne McKay report, was that cyberbullying, a new and devastating phenomenon in our province and around the world, ought to be defined in law, including provincially, Mr. Speaker, where the consequences, including restitution, can be spelled out for those that engage in cyberbullying. So I will ask the Premier, in light of that report, in light of the bills that have been brought before this House before to actually put a definition of cyberbullying into law so people can recognize it for the offence that it is, will the Premier commit now to defining cyberbullying in Nova Scotia law and spelling out the consequences for those that engage in it?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as I've pointed out already, we have a constant ongoing dialogue with the federal government around issues like cyberbullying. Obviously, if it is to be a criminal offense, then it must be defined in the Criminal Code of Canada, which would be something that I'm sure the federal government already has this on its radar, because I know that we have been working through the Department of Justice to bring these issues to their attention. I know that the Minister of Justice is certainly aware that legislation needs to evolve to address new events, and so that's what we're doing.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the time for dialogue is over and the time for strong action is now. There are many offences defined in law provincially, and cyberbullying should be one of them. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the time has come to give our courts and law enforcement officials the power to confiscate cell phones, laptops, and other electronic devices when they are used as weapons against our own children. And so I will ask the Premier, will he bring in legislation to give the courts and law enforcement officials the power to take away laptops and cell phones and other electronic devices when they are used in such a destructive manner?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe the jurisdiction of the courts are limited in that regard. Mr. Speaker, anything that is used in the commission of a criminal act, I believe, would be capable of being confiscated. But I take the question very seriously. What I want the Leader of the Conservative Party to know is that there is obviously a review of these matters that are necessary. We're going to look at it in a comprehensive fashion, and we'll be doing so over the next little while.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on his final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that answer from the Premier. I will say that he may believe that the courts and law enforcement officials and others have all the tools that they need, but they are not being confiscated now in these kinds of situations, and they should be. So I hope he does bring a review and actual actions that we can all take together to stop cyberbullying in its tracks. The McKay Task Force was a very comprehensive task force on the issue of bullying and cyberbullying. It consulted with a great number of Nova Scotians and produced a wide number of recommendations. Government has adopted them piecemeal when in fact it represents a comprehensive whole. I will ask the Premier if he will commit today to implementing all of the recommendations of the McKay Task Force so we can together get on with the job of stopping bullying and cyberbullying and the effects that it's having on young people.
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, we thanked Mr. McKay for his review. We took all of the recommendations seriously. We didn't implement them piecemeal. In fact, we accepted the vast majority of those recommendations. They were implemented, the ones that we believe could be effectively implemented by the provincial government, and we did that in an expeditious fashion.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, parents, teachers, and communities across Nova Scotia have been put through a heart-wrenching process reviewing schools for closure. Last week, after hundreds of hours of work, including community meetings and board deliberations, the Minister of Education stepped in and requested the boards call off these reviews. Last year, on April 11, 2012, the Minister of Education refused to intervene in a review because, and I quote, "Under the legislative process, the school review is very clearly mandated and is not to be interfered with by the Minister. The school review process is a very clearly articulated process where parents and communities have an opportunity on 2 separate occasions to offer their input in the process and to the board." Mr. Speaker, it seems that the Minister and this government stood behind the school review process enough not to get involved last year. So my question to the Premier, at what point did the government decide that the school review process was flawed?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, school reviews and the allocation of budgets and assets are the responsibility of the school boards of our province. We elect them, their communities elect them to do this job, and of course we support those boards in their work. The review process in this province, in fact, has been altered a number of times, as the Leader of the Opposition would likely know. Unfortunately, they have become increasingly adversarial, and we don't like that. We want communities to be able to make good decisions around the allocation of the assets that we have. I'm sorry, is there a further question there? So, Mr. Speaker, so I believe what we are attempting to do with this is we made the request to the boards, and it was a request to suspend the current reviews in order that we might work with them to find a less adversarial way to do what it is that they are trying to achieve, which is get the best balance for communities in terms of the assets, in terms of capital expenditure, in terms of the operating revenue that they, or the operating funds that they have to provide the best possible educational service.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the school review process is no more adversarial this year than it was last year, Mr. Speaker, and yet the board last year and the minister and the government support it. Mr. Speaker, school boards across this province last September went about doing their business, Mr. Speaker, doing what they've been elected to do, as the Premier has said, and they've been doing it to follow legislation that's been put in place, Mr. Speaker, by this government and reviewed by the Minister of Education, Mr. Speaker, back in 2010. So, Mr. Speaker, School Boards Association stated that the minister's request could be all but a moot point because of legalities on the board decision. Even before the association raised this point, boards, including the socio-regional, were skeptical that they could heed the minister's snap request because they simply can't afford to maintain schools' needs so that they can stay open and pay teachers and students support, Mr. Speaker. The government has said, Mr. Speaker, they are not going to provide any more money to school boards. So my question to the Premier, how is the Premier going to protect classrooms in the wake of the minister's about-face?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the minister did exactly what she should do. She waited for the completion of the process. It came to an end, I believe, the last day of March. Within a day or so, the minister made the request of the boards. That is as it should be. This year, the boards will get more money than they got last year, and, Mr. Speaker, they will receive this year the highest per capita funding in our province's history.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, if this process was flawed, the minister should have stepped in at the very beginning instead of putting communities and school boards through what is a very difficult and gut-wrenching experience, Mr. Speaker. And I want to remind the Premier, Mr. Speaker, the Social Regional School Board is not getting more money, Mr. Speaker. 5 out of the 8 boards in this province have seen a reduction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians know this about faced by the minister and the NDP government is in the school review process is simply electioneering, Mr. Speaker. If this government was truly committed to improving the school review process, it would not have waited, Mr. Speaker, until there were 3.5 years into the majority mandate to do so, Mr. Speaker. They would have funded public education so boards could have had the option of keeping schools open and supporting all students, Mr. Speaker. It's bad enough that the Premier has tried to balance the budget on the backs of children, Mr. Speaker. Now he's playing politics with their education. Will the Premier admit to communities, teachers and parents and students that his government's request to call off the review was just an empty political maneuver with no real commitment to help communities keep their schools open?
Honourable The Premier.
Mr. Speaker, quite the opposite. What the people of Nova Scotia know is that in working with the NDP government, that we are always prepared to listen to them and to their community, that we take very, very seriously the responsibility that we find ourselves with in terms of the finances of the province, but we balance those with our desire to improve services to our citizens. You only have to look at this year's balanced budget, where it is not only balanced financially, it is also balanced in that we are extending more services like the early years centres, what we announced this morning, like insulin pumps, like putting more money back into the hands of senior citizens. I mean, these are all things that improve the quality of life in our province, and the best thing that the opposition could do to support that would be to vote for the budget, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On April 3rd, 2 days after the school review process was finished, the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development wrote school boards to request the school review process for the 2013-14 be suspended. And Mr. Speaker, it got some headlines. Later that day, the same minister said she's not able to interfere, and all she can do is ask the school board if they'll honour the requests, and I'll table that article. My question to the Minister of Education is, how will the school board stop the school review process?
Honourable the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much. The school review process for the upcoming year would start in October and end in March. So I've asked them to suspend identifying schools for the upcoming school year, because it is it would be starting in October and ending in March. So I've asked for a suspension in the review process while we work through a better way. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North on his first supplementary.
Yesterday, the president of Nova Scotia School Boards Association said the minister's request has left them with more questions than answers. He said the Education Act dictates that the decision of boards with this regard is final. So boards have questions about whether they have the leeway to reverse this or not, and I'll table that article. So my question to the minister is, does the minister honestly believe the school boards can do anything to stop the school review process and keep schools already slated for closure open?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That is why I made the request of the board to suspend the process and to delay the decisions that were made in the current year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the minister put parents, teachers, students, communities, and school board members through a nightmare process, and then at the 11th hour asked the school boards to do something she knew that was not even possible. Some school boards had already made decisions about the fate of their small rural schools. So my question to the minister is, will she please stop spreading false hope to the Nova Scotians who were led to believe that maybe her announcement meant something when it was really just political posturing to grab a newspaper headline?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We've listened to school boards and parents and communities around this process. I have asked for the school boards to suspend the process. It's a request that they've asked themselves, Mr. Speaker. We are listening to Nova Scotians. We want to move forward in a more positive, collaborative way and make sure that community's voice and the school boards can work together collaboratively. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year on April the 11th, 2012, the Minister of Education stood in this House and talked about the school review process, and she said, and I quote, "The school review process is a very clearly articulated process where parents and community have the opportunity on 2 separate occasions to offer their input in the process and to the board." And Mr. Speaker, I will table that. Last week, when speaking of the very same process, the very same minister said, and I quote, "The process was adversarial and heartbreaking," and I will table that. So my question to the minister, here's a complete contradiction. Will the Minister of Education tell members of this House when she had that change of heart, when she had the recent flip-flop, and when this all came to light?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The school review process is a very clearly articulated process that is problematic and adversarial. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Colchester North on her first supplementary.
Well, I'll give the minister credit. She's taken two contradictory quotes of her own and put them together into a new one. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Education spent nearly $1 million on ads and promotions while wait lists for accessing speech-language pathology and school psychology were growing. It's the same minister who slashed funding to school boards and offered no additional supports to cover increasing cost, and then turns around and asks them to halt their decisions. So on behalf of communities, parents and teachers, my question to the minister is this: what does the minister suggest that boards cut in order to fulfill her latest political whim?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We very clearly heard from the communities that the process was problematic. It was not doing what the intention was, to review schools to the benefit of our children, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the school board so we can move forward in a positive way. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development had a chance to reassure parents that they will continue to have choice in what kind of childcare they want for their children. When she had a chance to be clear, she waffled. When given an opportunity to bring clarity to the confusion her predecessor created on the file, Mr. Speaker, she ducked. And yesterday, during estimates, the minister muddied the water further by saying that Nova Scotians are seeing the beginning of a big shift. So my question through you to the minister: will the minister be clear today? Will she tell parents and small business owners what this government's plans are for child care?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And this was a very important day for Nova Scotians, because this is the day that we were able to discuss how we are going to be shifting philosophically how we take care of our youngest citizens. So today we announced that we are going to be providing an integrated service model in the department, working collaboratively along with our stakeholders in that process and our advisory committee. So I want to say that as we move forward, we are going to be setting up some initial sites. But while this is happening, it will be business as usual in the province of Nova Scotia. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, let me break this down to help the minister. In December 2011, the minister who used to be responsible for childcare attended a press conference with CUPE, where she said her department had begun discussing phasing out public funding for private operators. And the minister said, and I quote, "It takes a long time to change a system, but I think there's a great appreciation in government that something needs to be done." And I will table that, Mr. Speaker. So my question to you, to the minister: will the minister tell us today if the former minister was incorrect when she said that the NDP was bringing socialized daycare to Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's very important that we recognize that it is imperative that we support our youngest citizens in this province. We need to make sure that from birth until our children enter school and throughout the system, that we provide every opportunity for them to be successful. The announcement today is providing an opportunity for Nova Scotians. There's going to be a shift with the integration of our services. We have created a new department. Under one roof, we will be able to serve the needs of our children. As I said, from primary forward. There is no change in delivery of service in the province of Nova Scotia. Thank you.
The honourable member for Victoria de Lakes on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, back in February, 2 months ago, the Deputy Minister of Community Services appeared at the Standing Committee on Community Services. What he said was exactly opposite to what the Minister said at the CUPE News Conference. He said, and I quote, "There's no planning around, in fact, actually moving away from our existing model." And I'll table that, Mr. Speaker. Today, the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development told reporters that childcare funding is under review. So my question through you to the Minister, who was right and who got it wrong? Is there an NDP plan to change the funding model for childcare, or isn't there?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We have it right.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, last year the federal government expected revenues to grow by 6%. However, they have had to downgrade their revenue growth projections now to 3.8%. In short, Mr. Speaker, the federal government has had to adjust its tax base estimates downward, and with that, the feds are expecting lower revenue growth. This realistic adjustment is in stark contrast to what the Finance Minister is telling Nova Scotians today about our revenue projections. My question, Mr. Speaker, is with the province expecting to lose 1,100 jobs in the next year and clear indications of a slowing economy, where is the Finance Minister finding an extra $145 million in new personal tax revenues?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, private sector economists at all of the major financial institutions review Nova Scotia's budget economic assumptions, and they compare them against their own forecasts, Mr. Speaker. And in addition to that, the Conference Board of Canada, Apex economists and economists here in the universities all look at the economic assumptions of the department. And having done that, Mr. Speaker, they concur with the assumptions of the department, and that formulates the estimates, the fiscal forecast of our budget, a balanced budget that restores really important services like the children's dental program that were cut by the Liberals in the 1990s.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on her first supplementary.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Speaker, standing behind assumptions and so on is flying in the face of a lot of the facts that I'm bringing today. We're forecasting in the budget a 0.2% decline in employment next year. Just as important to note, the labour income growth last year was slower than it was even during the recession. And the downgraded GDP growth, because of downgraded GDP growth, the federal government is expecting revenues to be a full $17 billion lower than were predicted in the fall. All of these are facts, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we too are facing a slowing economy, and nominal GDP is only expected to grow 2.3% in 2013 and 3% in 2014. With all of these facts affecting the tax base, it's very difficult for us to understand, Mr. Speaker, how the Finance Minister can provide a lot of baffle gab about how she's going to achieve this overly estimated revenue future. Mr. Speaker, will the Minister of Finance tell Nova Scotians how provincial income